While there are no one certain way of doing anything, I will say that I have what I believe to be a pretty decent approach when it comes to sculpting eyes. It's geared towards working with a model, of course, and working with from observation, but here it's going to be just fine as well. I will simply use the same method as I would when working from life or from observation. Where I would normally compare the depth of the eye to the model and place the upper lid based on that, I here don't have a model, or at least not one that I can observe on equal terms from the side view, of course. So I use what I've set up for myself, the eye sockets, and place the eyes based on the depth established for the eye socket. I know I can bring the lids forwards should I choose to do so, but I play it a bit conservative, a touch conservative, and place the upper lid slightly further back than I think it needs to be placed in the beginning here. I work from the side view first, and from the side view I establish the furthest point forwards towards the profile. This part of the upper lid is going to sit in the middle of the eye more or less, so it's beneficial to know where that is going to be as well. And partially I know that because I have the overall width of the eye sockets where I believe they need to be, and I also have the width of the other features to judge against. The middle of the eye is usually in line vertically with the corners of the mouth, and the inside corner of the eye is in line with the widest point on the nostrils, when observed from the front, of course. So, knowing this, I can place the eyelids from the side view and control the placement left to right from the front view. By the virtue of establishing the eye socket, I already have a decent idea for where the outside corners of the eyes need to be. With the upper lid established as far as left to right, up and down from the side view goes, I can build backwards from there to the outside corner of the eye, which I know is at the outside edges of the eye socket, of course. I do, of course, pose in the mirror and try to get my eyes to where they need to be, looking slightly down on whoever has caught Kronos in the act here, which hopefully will be one of you out there one day seeing the sculpture in person, of course. To achieve this, all I do is tilt my head slightly back so that my iris and pupils move down inside the eye like I'm looking down on someone. This matters because the shape of the eyelids change depending on where you are looking, where your gaze is aimed. This means that when working from life, we have to carefully consider where we want our model to look right from the time we begin dealing with the eyes. The last thing we want is generic eyelids which betray the direction of the gaze that we've chosen. With one side established, I'm going to match the other side to the first one as best as I can. I try my best not to finish one eye at a time, just bring one far enough along to where the other can be matched to the first one. I wouldn't normally do it this way if I was working from life. I'd look for any idiosyncrasies in the position of the eye within these sockets and try to match them as best as I can. Very often the eyes are slightly asymmetrical, one sitting slightly higher than the other, for example. But since this piece is going to be from imagination and limited reference as well, I decided to keep things a little bit simpler for myself and just mirror the placement of the second eye as best as I could, making it the same, but of course the opposite as the first. This works well enough here, but doing so is not going to always capture a particular model's look, so keep that in mind if you are working from observation. In order to do this successfully, a center line is going to be vital to us. Center lines seem perhaps as some beginner trick that you can graduate from using once you've gotten enough experience, but I don't think this is true at all. The center line makes comparing symmetry much easier, and any trick that we can take advantage of here to make our work a little bit easier for ourselves, I think we should try to use. Even so, I end up messing up the symmetry quite a bit and changing things later, which is pretty typical as well, and not something that I'm overly concerned about. So far we've dealt with the position of the upper lid and its furthest point forwards in relation to the profile, and the placement of the outside corner of the eyes with the lids connecting from one to the other. With the left to right up and down position established from the side view and the left to right position established from the front view, we can move on to establishing something that most are going to find rather hard to place. And that is the elusive inside corner of the eye. The inside corner is elusive because its position is hidden from the side view by the eye itself, of course. The form of the eye eclipses the inside corner of the eye. This means we have no good way of figuring out its placement in depth in the same way that we've been using up until now. Depth being what we would see from the front view, of course. Many depths can be observed by turning your work to another view and turning that depth into left and right. And the outside corner is one of these depths. The inside corner sitting behind the eye itself means we can't get a good read on its depth. From the front, we can see its placement up and down, left to right, of course, and we should first work to place it in this orientation, which is what I do. You might ask yourself, why not simply observe from the 3/4 view the depth of the inside corner of the eye, because you can see it from there, but observing from here does not work for placing something accurately in relationship to something else, because we have placed everything else accurately in relationship to everything else from the side view, not from the 3/4 view. We can simply get an idea from the 3/4 view that the inside corner of the eye sits deeper than the bridge of the nose, for example. But this is not really a mystery to us. We already knew that to be true. From the front, we can see two things which you will find on most people, in some variation or another. The inside corner of the eye lines up vertically with the outside of the nostrils. This is, of course, a more or less thing, but it tends to be fairly true. The other thing we can see is that the inside corner of the eye sits lower than the outside corner of the eye, just by a little bit. Both of these are interesting observations that we should use, but they don't tell us anything about the depth. So since we can't observe the depth of the inside corner of the eye, we're going to use our knowledge to solve this one for us. We're going to use logic. We know that the inside corner of the eye, because we've studied anatomy, we know that the inside corner of the eye sits further forward than the outside corner of the eye. The eyes are not parallel to the front plane of the face, in other words, they sit at a slight angle to the front plane of the face, which is achieved by the outside corner sitting further back than the inside corner, of course. This is pretty much going to be the case on everyone you meet, so you can always use this trick to place the inside corner of the eye, if not perfectly accurately, then at least in a place that's more correct than wrong in depth, which is often, very often, going to be more than enough. If something can't be observed on equal terms, we can very, very often simply use logic and visual cues to tell if we've placed it more or less correct. And more or less correct is more often than not going to be enough. I always start with the lids because I find they deserve most of the attention when it comes to sculpting the eyes. Many times you'll see people start with a ball of clay and then build the eyelids around that. I find that more information that is vital to the success of the sculpture is present in the eyelids, and so I choose to start there. The position of the inside and outside corners, of course, how deep the eyes are placed within the skull, all of this can be found with ease simply using the lids. It should also be noted that the lids don't usually sit directly over the top of each other, though this is going to change based on the position of the head, of course. If you lean your head really far back, this is not true anymore. But in a neutral position or one that's leaning forward like what I'm working on here, the upper lid is going to come further out than the lower eyelid. This can easily be observed and established, and more importantly, tweaked before the ball of the eye enters the picture. I talk about flexibility a lot, but I really think it matters, and everything I do is geared towards achieving this. the sculpting of the eye being no different. Dealing with the lids first means that we have much less clay present than if we had the entire eyeball there, and this means we are more flexible. Changing the lids around and moving them is much easier with less clay present, and if it turns out I've messed up the depth of the eye, it's going to be apparent to me before the eyeball is placed. This means I can push the lids back, and there is less clay and forms to destroy when doing so, compared to if the eyeball was there. The lids are going to say everything I need them to say, and then the sclera just fits in between them. Ideally, at least. If the lids are going to do what they need to do, then the eyeball is going to behave. The other way around, though, is not always true in my experience.